we okay, got it. And we and we have bought some land up in Healdsburg, and we basically built a concrete home, 8-inch concrete walls, no vents, no decks, no, we have 2 Vulcan vents and that's it. Everything else is closed in. It was very, very much our priority to design and develop a home that would be able to be somewhat, hopefully fire resistant. Yeah, so and now I just walk around the neighborhood and I just see wood fences touching homes and things. And anywhere I go now, even, went down to visit my mom in Santa Monica or something, it just, the back of my neck, the hair on the back of my neck just goes up when I see such blatant hazards in a way. So that's my story. That's it. But anyway.
That's great. I think one of the downsides of the work that we do is once you see it, you can't unsee it. And, it's a challenge. Great. Well, why don't we go ahead and end the poll and we can go ahead and share. So lots of great work happening, some opportunities that hopefully we'll get to touch on today, and keep some time for Q&A if there are any questions about it. And love what we're seeing here. So it sounds like there's an opportunity to share a little bit more about SoCo Adapts, which we'll touch on.
Ivan, I did another boo-boo. Dana and Marshall need to talk for a minute about the tax measure. I apologize. I totally skipped over them and they have patiently not said anything, but I would like them to go first if you don't mind.
Of course.
It's just a quickie. All right, you guys go for it.
I don't know if Marshall's actually on yet, Priscilla, so I don't know if you want to wait for him or.
He was.
He was here, yeah. And then
he dropped off.
Yeah, he's got a really wonky cell signal. So do you want to wait till the end or do you want to go down?
I can go now.
Okay.
If you guys don't need Marshall, but I'm pretty up to speed on it. So,
okay.
I'm Dana Hampson. I'm the consultant that has been working with the Fire Service Working Group for the last 4 years. I worked with them on Measure G, which I imagine most of you are familiar with, the tax measure that didn't pass by just around 2% back in March of 2023. Since that time, the team has regrouped and met with a bunch of different stakeholder groups and ultimately decided to go ahead and move forward with a citizens-based initiative that has been funded by the Chiefs Association of Sonoma County. So we went back to the drawing board and did a reassessment of what the needs were based on current climate conditions and current emergency situations that affect the county, including flood, all hazard. And the goal has not changed. That I'm still seeing this quiz. Okay, sorry. That the goal is to provide more effective, efficient, and sustainable fire response, paramedic services, and wildfire prevention and response capabilities to protect the health and safety of the Sonoma County residents, business owners, and visitors. So we have completed a plan that we submitted to the county back in June, the initiative packet, and it breaks down what we would do with a 0.5-cent countywide sales tax that would generate roughly $60 million a year. So we are in the process of doing the signature gathering required to actually try and get this on the March 2024 ballot. We have just completed the signature gathering over this last weekend, and we'll be submitting the signatures to the county for verification, hopefully later this week. So if everything goes well, this will be on the ballot, as I said, in March of 2024. And if it passes, the funding associated with this tax measure will start rolling in the beginning of 2025. Let's see, what else do you guys want to know? So the difference for this measure is that obviously the Sonoma County Chiefs Association group, the Fire Service Working Group, is the one that created the whole plan associated with this, instead of the county being the governing organization creating the tax measure. And another difference is there used to be a consolidation requirement associated with the Measure G. In this tax measure, there won't be a consolidation requirement, because we feel like the funding associated with the measure will get agencies to a healthy level of funding where willing partners will naturally move ahead with consolidation. The agencies that are funded associated with the measure are obviously all of the different fire agencies within Sonoma County. There's also some funding going to, I think, what is it called? PSI, former PRMD, and the fire marshal's group of the county. There's funding going to Fire Safe Sonoma. There's funding for REDCOM. There's funding for new technology investments, recruiting and retention, training programs, etc. I'm going to just stop there for a second and see what questions you guys have, since I only have 10 minutes. So I want to make sure that you guys walk away with at least a high level understanding of what's included in the measure and what it's trying to achieve.
Dana, did you say the signature gathering has been completed?
It was completed over this last weekend. They're going to double check to make sure that all the verification gets us to the number that we need. But they do believe that the validated signatures should exceed the target that we needed.
Dana, since this measure and the funding that it'll generate is so essential for the future of fire service in Sonoma County to have sustainable long-term funding, what role do you think COPE can play in helping it be successful? Like what is the value for COPE, or what way can COPE support getting the initiative passed next year? Have you all talked about that yet?
Yeah, so I didn't mention that we are in the phases of doing our outreach and education. There's been a lot of focus on a lot of the elected government officials, stakeholders. We've gone to the city council members and mayors and presented. There's meetings being scheduled with a bunch of the different city council members individually, as well as the board of supervisors. There's been a lot of updates that have been going out to a lot of the different stakeholders, but now is when we're going to be reaching out to the next tier of stakeholder partners to get them educated, hence us coming to present to you guys. And we'd love you guys to share information about this tax measure. I think Marshall submitted our one-page overview that would be great for you guys to push out to your network so everybody can get educated on the measure so that they feel comfortable participating in the election in March and voting in whatever way they see fit.
Great, thank you, Dana. I did drop that flyer in the chat, not without, yes, I'm full of it today. I see Linda Collister has her hand raised. Please unmute and give us your question, Linda.
Yeah, I just had a question. So for us out here, did the law pass that you have to have the 2/3 vote, or is this going to go through with majority? And then once the money gets there, one of the big things is and you said it wasn't a county measure, but once the money gets there, we want to make sure that's a lot of money, that it goes to the right places, or what that you guys have put forward. And then it continues to do that, and it doesn't get sucked in somewhere else, and which always seems to happen.
Great questions. So the Jarvis measure, the one that's requiring that they're planning to put on the ballot in November 2024, would require signature-based measures to achieve over 2/3 versus the over 50% in order to pass. And it has a retroactive clause. I think it's 2 years. So for this measure, we are going ahead and trying to achieve the 67%. So where we didn't do a robust campaign associated with Measure G, we are very committed to doing an extensive campaign for this measure to make sure that it passes with the 2/3. We have been getting intelligence that the Jarvis measure is polling really poorly. So even if it does make the ballot, it's definitely not a slam dunk that that would actually pass. Your second question was around the county and the county's ability to reallocate funds. Because this is a citizens-based tax measure, any reallocation would require them to go back to the voters. So the allocations for each of the different agencies is fixed and cannot be reallocated.
And Linda, another important part from a city perspective is these funds can't supplant existing funds. That's written into it as well. So they're in addition to, not in lieu of.
Excellent.
Thank you for that.
I noticed that Marshall is back on again, but his signal must be wonky because I've seen him come and go a couple of times. Marshall, I just want to give you a chance to say something. Oh, he's gone again. All righty. Let's
Thank
not
you.
count on that.
He's there.
guys hear-
Oh,
Can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
yes.
Yeah, sorry about that. I was just gonna let you guys know, Dana mentioned the percentages coming to North County and what they could mean for the North County as far as premium levels of service.
No, she didn't.
Okay, so I don't know, I should probably mention that it's gonna go on the ballot in November, or no, sorry about that, March of next year. It would start collecting taxes in October of 2024, and roughly North County, in my opinion, does pretty well. So for Hillsburg City as a city itself, it's roughly 2.51%, and then they also get a little bit more funds because it's going to cover their Redcom costs. So that'll translate into the Montage station on the north end of town being staffed in another inspector position, as well as a battalion chief. For Cloverdale District, it's 2.78% of the tax. That is to fund and reclassify some positions at the Cloverdale District Fire Station. So roughly 4 to 5 people could be on duty there. And then for County, it's 5% for firefighting. So that'll staff or have very similar staffing as Cloverdale, also in Geyserville with 4 or 5 on duty, including your paramedics, at least one paramedic, and then also to pay for 2 of the 3 shifts at a potential new station. The new station also being funded by the tax in the southern Alexander Valley area. So, and then the Northern Sonoma County Fire District also gets another 5% to administer, run the vegetation management crew or crews that'll be used countywide. So the end result is extra people. The Montage facility gets built out, and Northern Sonoma County gets a second station that can have 24/7 staffing. So that's just a kind of a quick synopsis of the percentages and what the benefit to the North County is, and then also the North County ability to do the vegetation management for the entire county. So that's all I would like to add. Thank you.
And do we know what percentage is actually vegetation management versus
It's
staffing?
5%. 5%.
Okay, sorry, I couldn't hear
5%. Yeah, it's 5%, and that's mainly for personnel, but there's going to have to be some cost in there for doing environmental review, maintaining chippers, doing project stuff. The way, since I'll have a heavy hand in it, the way I would like to see it be done is the county has a CWPP, Fire Safe Sonoma. That's who identifies where the projects are at, and then grants maybe you're secured, sales tax money, maybe as a match to figure some way out, rather than it's just, hey, someone thinks there's a good project to go do, let's go do it with the sales tax fund. So that's kind of how I see it being working, as how does things get done as far as veg management. I think Dana mentioned, but Permit Sonoma, I think gets funds, so they'll have a piece to help out with. And then Fire Safe Sonoma is also going to receive funding from the sales tax to $250,000. So that'll hopefully keep the countywide CWPP going, maintained, and then also the position that Micah has right now, the executive coordinator position, that would hopefully fund that position. Right now it's grant funded, but would fund that position for a turn out of the sales tax. So that was kind of some of the thoughts with that too.
Alrighty. We need to kind of wrap up this portion of the meeting, but we've got Dana and Marshall here to answer questions. So if anybody else has a question, please either put it in the chat real quickly or raise your hand and go ahead and speak.
And I also think, Priscilla, maybe since time's short and if people really want to go into the nitty gritty of how everything's written, everything like that, or want to help out with fundraising, I think maybe we do a whole separate meeting that maybe one of the fire districts or somebody else could host, rather than, and obviously Cope would be totally invited to it, but having maybe a standalone meeting in the future if there's a need for it.
Yeah, I think for the sake of transparency and people's interest in this really hot topic, that it would be an excellent idea to have a separate meeting where people can really dig into some of the details and see some of the visuals that go along with it, just so that we can learn about it. And as you know, COPE leaders are pretty darn good about getting out there and letting people know about these measures. So we would do a much better job, I think, getting those details and things in our hands that we can distribute. The flyer did go in the chat, so hopefully people will use that. But I think more information is always good. So thank you for that. All right, Dana, thank you so much for coming and spending part of your afternoon with us. You're welcome to stay if you're interested in our topic today. And just another kudo to Dana. Her husband is a COPE leader on Fitch Mountain, so we're grateful for her contributions in that way too.
He's a radio nerd.
Yes, he's a radio nerd. We love that. All right. Thanks, Dana. Ivan, go ahead and take it away.
All right. It's definitely important to make sure we have the funding for these things. So I'm glad we were able to cover that. And so thanks also for those who responded to the poll. It looks like we lost the responses from the first time around, so we won't do that again. But what I loved seeing in there was just kind of a baseline for some of this group's actions, and was very impressed by the work that many of you have already done. So I'm going to be talking today about thinking like an Ember and what insurers are looking for in this space as we think about what's happening in our insurance market, and how can we help make wildfire defense simple for the members of our community and protect our community. Before I go further, I'm going to share a few images of post fires. I know for some that can be upsetting, so just letting you know now. I hope they're all tasteful. But as you all know, 1 in 5 homes in the United States are at risk of being in a wildfire. And this has been pretty widely reported. It's now showing up on real estate listing sites, what risk scores are. And where we've seen opportunities, though, is down at the individual parcel level. One silver lining that's come out of a lot of the research that's happened in the last 5 years is we've started to recognize and be able to identify which features of homes make them more or less likely to burn. And as we see here, we have a pretty typical neighborhood, plenty of homes close to each other, with unfortunately too many destroyed, but also a lot that survived. And so being able to look at what contributed to survival and what contributed to destruction has revealed some of the features in the literature. This report came out about a month ago. So in California, that's almost 2 million structures that are in our state face high wildfire risk. And a recent study looked at the ones that are now required to disclose wildfire risk, and those are selling for less on average than nearby homes that are outside of those wildfire disclosures. And so that's becoming a bigger factor as we sell homes, as people move into our area. And of course, as property owners, many of us are concerned about that. The thing I think most don't realize, though, is how much a role structure hardening and ember resistant structure construction can play in reducing the risk. So the defensible space component can reduce risk probably by about 30 to 40%, but then the remaining piece of that is the structure hardening, making sure that we reduce fuels, but then also protect structures in a better way. And the latest science is showing how we can do that. So we'll be covering more of these in detail during the presentation. So I'm not going to spend too much time on this right now, but this is a nice little summary for those who want a handout. And what's great about this is that it even works if you're in the middle of a burning forest. So this is a property, a farm that was in the glass fire footprint up on Sonoma Mountain, and they had begun clearing back in 2018. And unfortunately, the glass fire got to them before they had completed, but they had spent a lot of time around their production structures and doing defensible space and hardening them. And we can see the kind of difference that made in the effect of the fire. Another thing that's happening, I think most are aware, but the insurance commissioner has put out new rules and requirements about what they have to consider when determining rates and offering coverage. So there will now be, they're in the process of reviewing and approving all the rate filings. Those will start to happen in the next 3 to 6 months. And after that, all of the main insurance carriers in our state will be required to consider the mitigation work that property owners do, most of which touches on the same things that we'll be covering today. So when we think about some of the challenges we have reaching folks in the communities, and maybe even as ourselves as we've gone through and are involved in this work, but a lot of us get the concepts, and I think some of our public agencies and educational institutions have done a great job getting the word out there. And we still have some objections, though, that need to be overcome. And so as organizations like COPE, we can help property owners and community members address some of these things. So physical difficulty, lacking specific information, the financial expense and the time, and being able to be that a trusted resource within your community, or helping refer them to opportunities to get help. So this is fairly technical work. That's, just showing 2 excerpts from some recent studies that looked at the Camp Fire in Paradise. And on the left side here, what we're seeing is work from the National Institutes of Standards and Technology, where they went structure by structure in Paradise and looked at the location before the fire, talked to first responders who were in these neighborhoods and saw the different chains of ignition, and identifying the role that fences and sheds in particular are playing in putting our homes at risk. Anytime that we have somewhere between about 30 and 50 feet of separation between large structures, or 30 feet of separation between sheds and accessory structures, those are real risks for just a radiant heat exposure. And also then fences act as a way to carry that ignition often right to the home, as we heard earlier from one of our members here. On the right side, what we're showing is the research around the distance between structures and the role that plays. So this chart here, I'm not going to go into it too great detail, but just one thing to point out at the top: the distance to the nearest destroyed structure was the most explaining feature of whether another structure was destroyed. So if a home destroyed was less than 50 feet away, only 5.8% of those homes survived. And if it was greater than 50 feet away, 35% of those homes survived. So that's helping us understand the role that, our communities, our neighborhoods, and our play and survival, and the importance of engaging our entire neighborhoods. All right. So this is a recent example of some of these principles in action that I thought I'd share just a little bit with you. Before we get going, though, this still image is from a helicopter. Obviously, it panned out. It's about a year ago. What do people notice? Where do we think the fire began, and what other things might be contributing to some of the behavior that we see here? Did anybody want to venture a guess? Where?
Looks like maybe a car accident or a dragging chain on that freeway over there started it.
Yeah,
Right,
if we
or somebody throwing out a cigarette or something like that.
I was
definitely
gonna say that.
go ahead. Okay.
It looks like it was wind blown.
Looks like there's some wind happening here, right? So we know it was July, we know it's Texas. If we sort of work backwards here on the right side, we see something next to a major roadway, and clearly that's probably the ignition source. And then the column of smoke, it's telling us it's blowing pretty good. When I looked into it, this was actually a field that the property owner had been cited twice for vegetation. And so they had gone out and they were actually mowing, and they struck something, metal, concrete, and that started a spark that then took off. As Pat and the other gentleman mentioned here, a lot of ignitions start on roadways with overheated vehicles or an accident, or can be cigarettes. But in this case, it was actually someone trying to do the right thing and mitigate, and then they had waited too long, and they were doing it 3 o'clock in the afternoon on a 100-degree day with 20 to 25 mile an hour winds. And so this thing took off, and I'm gonna go ahead and push play, and we're gonna go, and it's gonna zoom in close here. In the end, about 9 structures were destroyed, another 15 were damaged. And even with, multiple alarm response, this was very much at risk of getting into this neighborhood. So a couple of things, are we still viewing? No, we are not.
No.
All right. I'm not going to waste any more of our time there. I'm sorry. It was my first time trying to playing a video from a presentation like that. But what I can send the link around. What's very interesting here is that you end up with the fence along here being directly in contact with the grass that ignites. There are many playgrounds and sheds that clearly have all kinds of combustible paints, oils, things like that we like to store there. And those, in many cases, you watch the fire move to the house, and then it's just the corner of the house catching on fire. Now there's a broken window. And then soon enough, within about 5 to 10 minutes, these structures are fully engulfed as they move around. And so that's the role that embers are playing, and in the continuity of fuels as well. So we'll keep going here. I'm just gonna skip ahead to all of these. All right, and talk a little bit about what's happening in the insurance space. So I think many are familiar with this. This is the Wildfire Prepared Home Standard that the Insurance's nonprofit research institute has put out. We're lucky to have their former chief scientist for wildfire and durability on our advisory board, Dr. Steve Quarles, local treasurer that we have here in Northern California. And they're beginning to roll this out. And the sources I've talked to suggest that most of the main insurers that underwrite about 70% of the premiums in California are going to be directing property owners to this program. And there's an opportunity now to kind of get ahead of the curve and help people start to take steps and plan toward doing that. And they have a whole suite of resources online. There is an inspection and a certification process. And once you have that, you can take it to any of the member carriers that are recognizing that standard. And what we're going to talk about next is some of these treatments and things that they'll be looking for. And just to start as a sort of mental model, there's sort of 4 things to look at when assessing any particular feature is, can an ember get in here? Can an ember accumulate here? And then what is this surface, window, door, siding, what is that going to be exposed to out 50 feet in terms of radiant heat? Is there another building? Is there a wall of vegetation? Is there some sort of shed or something like that within 50 feet that might expose that to heat? And then finally, what are the continuities of fuel, like fences, like unmowed grass, that can help carry a fire that ignites further away from a structure right to the structure? So the first thing in IBHS is Class A fire rated roofs in good condition. On the left here is a good example of a good condition roof. The good news for us here in California is that going back about 20 years or so now, all new roofs have had to be Class A fire rated. And you know, as long as it doesn't look like the one on the right, you're in good condition, and that has about a 4-hour fire risk rating. The other bit here we talked about, can embers get in? So what we're looking for here, any spots in the building envelope or in the gutters, for example, that are attached, that are larger than 1/8 of an inch. So we want our mesh screens to be smaller than 1/8 of an inch. Attic vents, we have often, these are in the eaves, and there's gaps here between the blocking, as it's called, and the roof above. And then we also think about other ways. So in the crawl space vents, same thing, 1/8 inch or less, and decks. So any decks less than 4 feet in clearance off the ground are going to need to be screened so that embers and debris don't blow up underneath there, ignite, smolder, and then carry the flame to the underside of the vulnerable deck. So this is an example of a project that we recently worked on. It's really straightforward. You get the mesh, you dig a small trench, you attach the mesh to the underside, or in this case, the outside of the deck. They put a nice trim piece over there to kind of cover up that, and then backfilled with rock to anchor that screen in place. And that is a really solid, nicely done project there. One other thing that a lot of us don't think about, so we're showing 2 examples of garage doors, and these are the panel roll-up style doors, and it's pretty common for those to have gaps around the corners or the edges, in this case, where embers could be blown into our garage. We all have an idea of what we store in our garages, so definitely a vulnerable location. And we want to prevent that. So this one, fortunately, is pretty simple to address. On the right, we're showing a really nicely done weather stripping. So it's a roll that you can buy of vinyl weather stripping at the big box store for about $25. And it just comes and attaches. It's about 1.5 inches. And you can do it around the perimeter or the frame of the garage door. And that's often all it takes to make our garage doors ember resistant. This other one is probably, I think, the most challenging next to enclosing eaves in the wildfire prepared home standard. So they want to see 6 inches of non-combustible vertical clearance. And I'll show an example in just a moment about why that's so important according to the research. But along the base of any vertical to horizontal surface, whether that's with the ground or maybe a deck, or in this case on the right here, we have a roof line meeting the 2nd story of siding. We want to see 6 inches of non-combustible vertical clearance before the wood siding starts, or you know, that's typically the combustible clearance. So a couple strategies there. Some of them are more difficult. There's not a good retrofit option right now, unfortunately. And in some cases, this involves trimming siding or installing trim pieces of hardy board, for example, over existing siding. One promising thing here, so I'm showing two examples of one on the right here, which is a mitigation. You can kind of see how the siding boards change right about here. And what they did was a very nice, easy retrofit where you don't have to replace all your siding with fiber cement, which can be pretty expensive, but you can focus on just the area that's close to the ground. And so here they retrofitted, about 18 inches, it looks like, with fiber cement, painted it up, looks nice, very, very clean job. On the left here is a product that I'm really personally excited about, not yet on the market. They sell currently to utilities to wrap their utility poles in it, but they're talking about creating rolls that are maybe 6 inches tall. It's paintable, it's breathable, and it's an intumescent coating, which means that when it's exposed to heat, it swells up and swells shut and creates a barrier to heat for whatever is behind it. And that's going through some testing right now. So we might see that come onto the market in the next year to 2 years and be adopted as a possible solution here. All right. So I mentioned, why is this so important? So this ties in, that 6 inches of non-combustible vertical clearance ties in with the importance that we're seeing now with the zone 0, we're calling it. So from the edge of the structure and actually the overhanging roof line, including the eave, out 5 feet, the insurers are going to be requiring that be completely non-combustible. Now, I know that that's a huge shift for many of us. We've typically designed our landscaping with foundation plants right next to structures, and it's going to be a big adjustment. And there are some efforts going on right now at the state level to codify this in some of the defensible space regulations, conversations with insurers. So it could evolve, but the direction is definitely more non-combustible, possibly some potted plants that can be moved, possibly allowing for some irrigation, but nothing's settled right now. And the insurance industry currently is saying absolutely nothing combustible. So no plants, no matter how watered, or trees, no matter how limbed up, and certainly no bark mulch. That's probably the biggest and easiest one to fix right now. What I like about this image is that this is a time lapse from the insurance research lab that I mentioned before that put out the wildfire prepared home standard. And it's showing where an experiment they did where they bombarded this home with embers. And what's really interesting is where it gets bright, right? It's right here at the base and then about 5 feet out. And for whatever reason, with about 20 miles an hour of wind, those embers are hitting and bouncing off, and anything that would sort of catch them, like a plant or something like that, that then becomes an accumulation risk. Also, right next to the siding, and so that's why the 6 inches of non-combustible vertical clearances is becoming the standard going forward. And finally, I'm showing some examples here of how good the non-combustible zone 0 can look. So rock interspersed with stones and concrete. Here in the middle, they're getting most of it correct. The one thing I think that's an issue is kind of here in the background. You see a wood fence that's shielding or screening the air handling unit. So that's a little bit of a concern, but otherwise this looks really, really good. And then on the right here, of course, we talked earlier about privacy fences and the role that they've been shown to play in carrying flame directly to the house and really making homes vulnerable. So replacing the first 5 to 8 feet, and again, measuring from that roof line down, that's where it starts, that 5-foot measurement. If you can go further, 10, 15 feet even would be better, especially if it's running parallel to your home. But even if it extends outward, once we see about a 20 to 25 mile an hour wind, the flames can lay over, and those flame lengths are going to be 3 times the height of your fence. So it becomes a flame torch. And lastly, looking out 30 to 50 feet, what is my window seeing? What is my siding seeing out 30 feet? And if that were to catch on fire, would it be strong enough to resist it? And for most of us, the answer is no. You know, our options are to harden sheds like this to the same level as our homes, or work with our neighbors on some of their mitigations. In certain cases, you could consider constructing, you know, a non-combustible fence in between. That really only works if you have a single level house, though. So it becomes more challenging, that's for sure. And then we're separating the fuels in zones 1 and 2 and limbing trees up, making sure that our plants aren't in that 0 to 5 foot zone, and beyond those areas, they're in islands, they're broken up. We can still have bark mulch to provide that, you know, weed suppression and to keep moisture in the ground. But obviously within the 5 feet of the structure, that has to be managed differently. So I've covered a lot here. We have about a half hour, and I think now is a good time to pause if there's any initial questions before we go on and talk about some of the ways that our community can get help with this work.
I have a question.
Of course, please.
On the 6 inches of non-flammable between the siding and the ground level, with stucco and only maybe 1.5 inches between the bottom of the stucco and like a sidewalk that is going around a house, does the stucco count as non-flammable, or is there, I think there's some treatment that can be applied to that to make it non-flammable? I think Vulcan Vents has something that can go up under the stucco. Do you know if insurance companies or the wildfire prepared homes certification would count something like that? Or is, I saw you had also a picture with Hardy panel. Does that count then? If we put
Yes.
that on the stucco, or I'm not sure how it would work, but.
Yeah. That's a great question. And this is where the details really matter. With stucco, that's considered non-combustible, as well as Hardy board, fiber cement. There's a couple other brands out there. The real thing to consider and take note of, as you mentioned, there's that gap at the bottom in both cases where the stucco likely, you know, there's usually plywood behind it, same for fiber cement. And so that plywood that's behind it is vulnerable because there's a little bit of a gap to a smoldering ignition at the base of the wall. And so there are vents that you can install there. It exists to shed moisture, so we don't want to just completely seal it off. We still have to allow for that moisture exchange, but we can mitigate the heat and the embers from igniting that plywood. They call it sheathing behind the stucco. So the Vulcan vent option is a good one. That's certainly a little more expensive. You can use mineral wool. They sell it. Comes in strips or in a bag, and that can be stuffed up in there. And then there's a couple other options where it's like Z flashing with perforations in it that can also be used.
Thank you.
Good question.
Yeah, Ivan, I think Chief McDonald has his hand up.
Please go ahead.
So I just want to say, first of all, thank you for this presentation. When I worked in the Novato Fire District, I got to spend like 40 hours with Stephen Quarles and see the value of this. And one of the things that I wanted to share, or 2 things I wanted to share, one is that the IBHS website has great videos. You captured some of the pictures of the Ember cast machines, et cetera, that he created and worked through those. It's really fascinating if you haven't had a chance to watch exactly how embers start homes on fire, how they start decks on fire, where they collect, how they collect, how the spacing and gaps in a deck can make a difference, and how debris can collect. And I just think one basic thing that I wanted to share is basically where your leaves and debris collect is basically where an ember is going to collect. And so if you can kind of picture that when the wind blows and your leaves pile up in that same kind of location normally, that's where your embers are going to collect. And so that's why that first 5 foot is so vulnerable. And I just really wanted to echo, I think my theme for this fire season going forward is kind of back to the basics, and that really it's how important that 0 to 5 foot zone is. So I just wanted to echo that. And I would ask you as I guess from a fire prevention side here, that you share that message. I am fielding so many calls these days about neighbors and about trees and about what they can see out their window. But almost everybody in the case that I'm referring to, I could go to their house and find a bunch of issues in that first 5 feet. And so I think I just want to echo that how important that zone 0 is. And if we can start, instead of pointing with our fingers, pointing with our thumbs, maybe a little bit, and really focusing inward, I just would ask that and say thanks for that great presentation. So that's all I wanted to say.
Thanks, Chief. With you 100% there.
One of our sayings in COPE is start at your house and work out. Because there is exactly what Chief McDonald has said. There's a lot of pointing over the fence at those people. And, it's just nice to start at your own house and work out, and hopefully work with your neighbors around some of their issues, but start with yourself. It's kind of like putting the oxygen on yourself first, right? And then helping other people. I put one of the links to one of the IBHS videos in the chat for you. I also put in the chat the homeowner's checklist. Moni asked one of the questions in the questionnaire at the beginning of today's call reference SoCo Adapts review of property. How can a homeowner's residence request one? So maybe talking about SoCo Adapts, which is what is on your screen right now.
So beautiful segue. Thank you. And so the SoCo Adapts program, was started in 2017. It was applied for. It is out in our communities. This is a map showing all of the different project areas and eligible parcels. So you'll notice Fitch Mountain is within that region. We have the Vineyard Club up here, and then and Asti and Cloverdale up here. We also have the west side over here off of West Side Road. So Mill Creek, Felta, and Sweetwater. And it's a great program, and we could really use your help getting the word out. So it provides a free assessment through the end of this year, and it's about 2 hours and about a $300 value. It then makes a property owner eligible for up to $10,700 in rebates towards defensible space and home hardening assessments or improvements, excuse me. There's of course no obligation to do anything. It's not a code enforcement program, and we'll share the link that you all can share with your members to check eligibility and get started with that. There's a quick phone call, and then we schedule the time and we come out and do it. This is in partnership with your local fire agencies. So the Geyserville Fire District and Evans been out there doing great work on the defensible space side. And then my company, Madronas, we were contracted to provide the structure assessment pieces. Rebecca, did you have a question?
Yes. Actually, she's raising her hand for me. I'm Kobe. With regard to the regions, how were those regions determined?
So that is a question I don't know the answer to. I think it was based on, I know that there was a component of risk and then also communities that had engagement, you know, and groups like COPE active in that
Okay.
area.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Ivan, we have a question. Moni is asking about follow-up questions to you. And if you feel comfortable sharing your email address. Moni in particular is from Mill Creek, which is a part of this grant. So I want to make sure that she can get out to her community that information about SoCo Adapts, right? I just heard you say Mill Creek was part of it, yeah?
Yes. So I'll drop in our standard email address, kind of our customer inbox. If you have questions specifically for this group, if you want to email me directly, this is my email address. I'd appreciate not blasting that one out.
No, of course not. I already have a few questions and I'll just send them to you because it's not all of Mill Creek in your area. So that's an interesting aspect of this already.
Yeah.
So Moni, you'll notice that Pat also dropped into the chat the direct parcel lookup, which is the way that SoCo Adapts has been putting out their information, is that look up your parcel to see that you actually are part of the program or not. And that's probably the best way to present it to your community so that you don't have to field that yourself.
Right. I was already looking at that and realizing that at least 6 of our neighborhoods are, but the 7th neighborhood is not.
And, you know, not to be a shameless plug, we do offer these services as to our private, you know, clients in practice. So if you're not eligible for a free one, but are passionate about this and would like some help, please contact me and we'll work something out. Want to give kudos to the leaders here and the communities that are represented in COPE North Sonoma County. So we're seeing some good numbers so far and would love any help that you're able to offer to increase this adoption and help our communities take action. Susie.
I'm not sure if you are the person who came up to inspect my neighbor's house, but someone did. I did refer her to Fire Safe Sonoma. So I'm not sure if it was it probably wasn't the SoCo Adapts program, but she is not going to do anything. And I'm not sure why. She says she has enough information and there was money to help her do the work. And I've also mentioned to her a couple of times that her junipers in front of her window might be, you know, creating extra risk and some of her other vegetation. But I think that she is at a point, she's probably 86 years old and figures nothing's going to happen to her. And she likes it the way it is. And I thought, wow, you know, I haven't had that kind of an answer before. You always think there's not enough money. They don't know what, you know, the risk is, but there's some people who they're just happy the way they are and in their own little world, and they're not going to change. Meanwhile, the neighbors are at risk. So that's maybe something you hadn't considered before.
Well, I think that's a common response for a lot. Unfortunately, I don't have a great answer. I think many in the fire service, including our own Linda Collister, have encountered a lot of that in the past. And I think it's all about showing and setting new norms in our communities. So if we can get all the neighbors around to show how beautiful a fire hardened home can look like. And, you know, we need sort of leaders in our communities, in our neighborhoods to show what it looks like. And then it starts to click for them. I think for a lot of folks, it's hard to imagine until they see it. So It's all about just reaching people where they're at. Some people want the information and now they're good, and it's going to take them a little while. Maybe they need to budget and plan, but we can only do so much.
Right, right, that's true. Thanks.
All right. So I mentioned it's pretty simple. You schedule a 15-minute call. After you do the property eligibility check, we'll come out and take a look. And then there's a really nice interactive report that you get, provides treatment options for all budgets. Many of the things that, like we talked about earlier, you can do yourself. And it definitely goes beyond code compliance. So this is all the latest wildfire science. It's not necessarily what's in the building code yet, because the building codes lag the science. Marshall.
Yeah, I was just going to say two things. So how the county selected those areas, it was not, me or you, right? It was the county thought that's where these inspections should or assessments should happen. So that's just kind of how it's come out. So sorry, Moni, about the Mill Creek thing. And then if you guys have people in your neighborhood that maybe don't have the ability, they want the work done, but don't have the ability to get the work done as far as defensible space, structural hardening is a little bit harder. Try to keep a list, because we often, or every once in a while, we get grants where we can go out and help people out. The fire district can, and we don't mind doing that if that's the only way it's going to get done. So if it's for the benefit of the community to help one of your neighbors out or a couple, or just keep a list, because there is grants that do come along where we can help those folks out. So just adding those two things, and thank you.
Well said.
Cheers,
Moni,
Marshall. I'll do a follow-up at the end, because it seems quite arbitrary, even on the map, how like parcels have been identified and singled out outside of an entire covered area. So I'll just follow up.
sounds good. All right, so that's it. That's the last part of the presentation. We've got a great community and set of leaders here. I think, especially in northern Sonoma County, you guys are showing the way for the rest of the county. So really appreciate all the support and that you've offered us, and appreciate any other support you're able to provide in helping get the word out.
So I just wanted to put a couple of different plugs out. One is we had our home inspected by Ivan, the information that we received was super helpful, much more in depth than any other inspection that we've gotten. And as you can tell by just meeting Ivan today, great person to work with. And I'm sure the folks that work with and for Ivan are also as wonderful. I've heard that from my neighbors. So his group has been really well received in our funky Fitch Mountain neighborhood. So I think that is something I want to share with you. And secondly, I want to share that I know Susie kind of gave a tale of woe of what can happen with neighbors, but not only did SoCo Adapts come out to Fitch Mountain, but Evan came out from Northern Sonoma County Fire Protection District and did inspections of every home on Fitch Mountain. And Pat and I have really witnessed some abandoned properties, and some folks that just have been dragging their feet are finally taking action. It's been very interesting to see. Especially after this wet winter and people's kind of mindset that we haven't had anything for a couple of years. It was really great to see people activated. So if you can get these inspections in your area, please go for it. I think that they're doing a great job, and it really does activate your community to get things done. So those were my words of support for Ivan's fantastic work. And I love that it's science-based. One question that I have for you, Ivan, and this is a bit of a, I don't know, it could be controversial. And that is about FireWise versus IBHS. This has been kind of one of my little concerns, and one of my pet peeves is, where do you see this moving? Is it worth it for our communities to go for FireWise? are we going to turn around and need to do more of an IBHS kind of approach? Thank you.
What a loaded question. So the short answer is yes to both, honestly. And the reason I say that is in the California Department of Insurance's new rules, Firewise is explicitly listed as one of the things that an insurer will need to offer a discount on your premium for. And so it can be as small as 8 homes and as large, I think, as about 2,000, which is too many. But somewhere in between there is a great way for our communities to get engaged, get active, do self-assessments, begin talking about it. It's a very nice framework. There are leads at CAL FIRE for every county and region. So there's support as you're going through the process. And I would recommend it as a program. That is not as substitute, but I think in addition to the IBHS Wildfire Prepared Home Standards. So Firewise is for the community, and then the Wildfire Prepared Home Standard is for the individual property. There is an effort to do a Wildfire Prepared Community Standard, but that is not yet off the ground there. Chief McDonald.
Yeah, I just kind of wanted to second that as well, which is I'd love to hear Marshall chime in maybe from a CAL FIRE perspective. I believe Firewise is also listed with CAL FIRE in that aspect as well. And so at one point I was quoted in saying that I would wanted to replace the COPE model with Firewise, and I just wanted to have this opportunity with all of you on here. That is not the case. There's nothing more important than the COPE model for what we're doing here. But what I want to say is that I do think the COPE model could help support the Firewise communities and could help to launch that and to make that aspect there. But it is not a replacement. They're very different things. But the Firewise side of it could also help lead to the IBHS side of it. But it's all going to be they're driven by the COPE model. So I just wanted to take that opportunity to say that.
Thanks, Lance. Appreciate that. I did put the link in for Firewise as well. And we are developing some expertise around Firewise. I know Diane Urban has done some work in her community, becoming Firewise there. Kudos to them. And I know there are a few other COPE communities that are Firewise. Is Vineyard Club one of those, Margie?
Yes.
Can't remember. Yeah, Marshall. And what are the other ones, Marshall? You probably know better than me.
Walling Road.
Yeah, and Chalk Hill is starting to look into it.
Great.
Canyon Road.
Great.
Way.
Great, thank you. And Fitch Mountain has submitted and just waiting to hear whether we were accepted or not.
And Lance, we see it similarly, that it's a build. It's part of being a COPE community, or I mean, that it could be part of being a COPE community, and the COPE leaders have tried to help that happen in the communities where there's interest.
Yeah, absolutely. I really appreciate that. I participate in Nevada when I was down there. Marin County has several Firewise communities, and the challenge from a fire district at the time was getting the message out, working with the neighborhoods, getting the community, and they weren't nearly as educated as this group is. And so the ability to have a COPE support that process. You guys are already doing, you have to have one meeting a year. You have to have a neighborhood educational thing. You guys do this, you guys already do so many of the things. It's just formalizing the process. And part of that process is a review package. And that review can only happen, I think now twice a year or something like that. So if you're interested in doing it, it's like you want to do it sooner than later so you can make it happen. But yeah, I definitely know you guys are, and I appreciate that support.
Yeah, if anybody needs help with that, just let us know and we'll guide you through the process. Fire Safe Sonoma is supporting. They are one of the they, along with CAL FIRE, review all applications for Firewise. Pat Abercrombie.
Just a comment about the selection of the areas. Fitch Mountain, as I understand from early conversations with Carol Leone a couple years ago when SoCo Adapts was first getting off the ground, Fitch Mountain was selected in part because of the density of our properties. We have 340 structures, homes on Fitch Mountain in a fairly confined area. I'll segue that into Ivan's slide with the table with the statistics in it and the beautiful red box around the Vineyard Club and their fancy 11%. But you probably did notice that Fitch Mountain had 29 inspections versus 10. So I just want to give a plug to Fitch Mountain that, and part of that is because these inspections are not, as I think you all know, a piece of paper with some checkoff boxes that somebody does by looking over your fence, hopefully when you're not home because they don't really want to talk to you. And then it's stuck in the gap in your gate or something for you to read later. These are shoulder to shoulder walkarounds on your property after Ivan or his staff member has spent at least an hour going around the home and taking photographs and measurements and things. This is really the real deal. And if I may, since it's ask the hard questions moment, Ivan, in the slide with Insurance Commissioner Lara, it mentioned driving down insurance costs as part of the issue. And I know this isn't your field, but I think we're understanding that farmers and State Farm and others are leaving the state because they can't make any money here. And it's because of the amount that we've driven down premiums in California to where they can't cover their costs. Do you have any comment on that?
You want me to comment it on a recorded webinar and defend insurance companies?
All right, inappropriate question.
No, I think you actually stated it correctly. You know, there's a range of factors that we could go into, and that's a whole nother presentation. But you know, they're citing the cost of construction in California with inflation. They're citing some of the regulation that they're dealing with, how the premiums are allowed to be calculated with. And then also there's some global financial realities that we're dealing with right now that are also playing an impact. So it's a complex situation, no easy answers, unfortunately.
So I did do some calling around to ask various insurance companies. We had a bunch of us who did this up on Fitch Mountain to ask them, how much of a discount will we get if we have a Firewise community? And the most that we heard was 3%. So for those of you that, get a $4,000 increase in your insurance over, in a year, which is happening quite a lot here on Fitch Mountain, that's not a lot of money. So I find it a very hard sell from the perspective of you're gonna, your insurance rates are gonna go down. And there is no evidence that they will be more likely to insure you because you're in a Firewise community, though as Ivan said, the fire, the Safer from Wildfires does list Firewise as one of the options.
Yeah.
I'll put a link for that in the chat.
To add on to that, the filings that I've looked at for the insurance companies, you're correct. It's between 1% and 3% for the Firewise component. What they are starting to talk about is a discount between 10 and 25% for wildfire prepared home or wildfire prepared home plus designated homes. And I think that starts to become material for many folks. And the other thing I've heard, don't quote me on this, but it's the direction of travel likely is that homes that have the designation from wildfire prepared homes will have more options to consider from an insurance standpoint, and those that don't are going to find that, you know, the California unfair plan is one of the only options.
You have got to kidding me. That's unbelievable. Wow. That is just unbelievable.
So question from Chief Collister, does anyone know if the insurance companies are only focusing on the WUI? Just thinking of Coffee Park. It would be good to have groups even outside of the WUI to be Firewise community. Fire doesn't know boundaries. I don't know, Ivan, if you have any insight into that. I guess some of the places in Nevada, aren't very WUI.
There are many neighborhoods in Nevada that are not traditional WUI, that are not in the interface, that are Firewise, that Firewise community. So yeah, it's all places, all locations. And back to the insurance thing, I agree with everything you're saying. And this doesn't really apply for like Fish Mountain, for instance, but where I've seen the benefits are when there are like a homeowners association tradition, like in Nevada and Marin County. So homeowners associations or like condo, townhouse type properties, those can really benefit from it as well. So I know that's not many of our properties here, but just so you know, that's where I think there's a greater benefit sometimes on those type of locations.
Absolutely. I think it all helps. So not just WUI areas, of course, the WUI, I think the quote was that I appreciated was it's a set of conditions. It's not a location. And there are many, many of our communities that face the conditions that create catastrophic wildfires. And yes, to Linda Collister's question, would they get an insurance discount? Yes, they should. And as somebody who's recently quoted, I live in in the junior college neighborhood in Santa Rosa, and I was denied a renter's policy because of wildfires. So it's definitely not just in the wildland urban interface areas that the insurance companies are looking. Moni asks, so forget about Firewise and go straight to wildfire prepared. I think the two are complementary. So I don't know that I would recommend that, but wildfire prepared home designation is likely to provide you with a little bit more rebate or premium discount. And yes, WUI is often changes depending on whether you're talking to politician, a fire agency, or an insurer. Definitely changes.
Great, thank you. It is 5 o'clock, so I want to wind up. Susie, if you want to drop something in the chat, that would be great. I want to thank Ivan so much for your time and for this great presentation that you did. It was very effective, I think, with your pictures and your science-based work that you showed us today. So thank you for that. I did put a lot of resources in the chat. This has been recorded, and we will be sharing the recording with you all on our YouTube page. So be sure and look for it there. But also don't forget that we have another more in-depth, I saw Chief Boaz there for a second. I just wanted to share with you, don't forget the webinar coming up on the 27th. And please share that with your communities. You can see the quality of the information that Ivan has to share. And I think all of our community members need this information. Susie, did you want to say something quickly before we close? I don't see anything in the chat.
I was writing too much. Just don't forget, I emphasize to people that the home hardening, the defensible space, and doing it together with your neighbors is for your safety and for avoiding the enormous trauma of losing your home, especially if you're an elderly person. And so I approach it that way, not just the insurance, possible insurance discounts.
Thank you, Susie. Really appreciate it. All right. Thank you all for being here again. Stay cool. take care of yourselves and thank you for all the important work that you're doing. You really rock it out there, COPE leaders and everyone else who supports us. Take good care. We'll see you next month.
Thank you. Bye-bye.